So now that we have finished our IPN, let's have a look at our clients area. So first of all, we need to create the login link in a header of our application, then obviously log out if the client is already logged in, display his name as well, and perhaps my orders link to redirect him to the page which displays basically all his purchases. To do this, let's open our template folder, open our header, and we can close the browser. Let's scroll down a little bit, and after our h5 tag inside of the header in div, let's start with the opening PHP tag and then closing after. We're going to start with if login is logged, and we need to pass login front key. Basically, we're checking if the client is logged in. Then we're going to display something else. We're going to display echo div id logged as a href equals / page equals login. Then login, closing a tag and closing div tag. So now if we save it, we should see this already in our header. So if we save this header, go back to application and refresh, you can see we don't see actually anything here because we are currently logging. We obviously don't have logout function yet, so we would have to clear the cache. But once I clear the cache, obviously all my logins to the sandbox and to the database will also expire. So I'm going to leave it for now. We'll have a look at it later on. But let's continue with our header here. So otherwise, if obviously the client is logged in, we're going to echo and in between a single quotes div id logged as, and we're going to display log in as colon and then space. Actually, okay, let's start with a strong tag here. So basically the name is going to be displayed in bold, and then echo login get full name front, and we're going to pass one parameter session get session, and a parameter for the session will be login underscore front. Okay, so we have this get full name method which we haven't got inside of our login class yet, and then after this we echo closing strong tag and then space vertical line, then href, and we have / page equals orders, double quotes, and my orders, closing a tag. Then let's close this one, echo. I'm going to scroll up a little bit so you can see things better. And space, vertical line again, and we have another a tag, href. This time it will be / page equals logout, and we're closing a tag, logout, closing a, closing div, and single quote and semicolon right at the end. Okay, so we have our two links plus the message you are logged in as. Now let's copy the name of the method, open our login class. So classes folder, login.php. Let's scroll right to the bottom, and after our string to hash method, we're going to create a new one and call it public static get full name front, and we have just id, which by default will be null. Okay, if isn't empty id object user equals new user class, then user equals object user get user id as parameter, and now if isn't empty user, we simply return user first name concatenated with space and then user last name and semicolon right at the end. Now this method is done, so we can save the file, go back to our browser, refresh, and hey, we've got some error. Let's have a look at the page source. Where does it stop? It stops actually where it should display the name. So if we go back, we've got public static. Okay, we didn't type in function. Again, I'm rushing a little bit. So if we save file now, refresh, you can see we've got you are logged in as Sebastian Soliński, which was assigned to my login. My orders, if I click on this, we obviously don't have this page yet. If I click on logout, this page doesn't exist either. So obviously these two simply display error. So let's move to the next section and create our My Orders page. Now let's create our orders page. So open the pages folder, create a new file called orders.php. Inside of this file, we're going to start with the opening PHP tag. Then we start with login, restrict, front. We obviously don't want anyone to have access to this page unless they are logged in. Then we're going to instantiate order object. So object order equals new order. And now we're going to create the variable called orders, which is going to turn into array. Object orders, order, and we're going to get client orders. And obviously we need to pass the ID of the client, which we'll get from the session, get session, and we get the ID of the client by login underscore login front, which stores the ID of this specific client. Now, get clients orders, a method doesn't exist yet. So let's copy its name, scroll up in our browser, open classes folder and open order.php file. Scroll right to the bottom. Again, a few new lines. Make the spaces quite large so that you can actually easily distinguish between different methods. We can close the browser now. And now let's start public function get. Sorry, we actually have it copied. Then client ID by default null. If isn't empty client ID, then we are going to write a SQL statement. Select all from this underscore table where client equals single quote and concatenation with this db escape client ID order by date in a descending order. In other words, the latest order will be right at the top. Okay, so that's our SQL statement. Now return this db fetch all, and we pass SQL as parameter. So now our method is ready. We can go back to our orders.php file. Now on a new line we instantiate object paging equals new paging, and we pass our orders as parameter, plus we only want to display 5 orders per page. And now rows equals object paging get records. Okay, so now rows stores all of the records of the client's orders basically. Now require once, and we need the header obviously underscore header.php. We can close PHP tag now. Let's copy this require once, create a few new lines, open in PHP tag require once, and obviously this time it's going to be a footer, and in between these PHP tags we can display h1 tag with my orders in it. Okay, so that's it in this video. Let's move to the next one and start displaying the list of orders. Okay, now it's time to display our orders. Obviously this rows array contains all of the records. So first of all we check if isn't empty rows Then we're going to display obviously all these records. Then else, we're going to display the message, and then obviously we need to close our if else statement. So if there aren't any records, we display the message currently you do not have any orders. Okay, now if it isn't empty, then we're going to be dealing this by displaying all these records within the table. So we start with the table, cell spacing 0, cell padding 0, border 0 as well, and class assigned to this table will be TBL repeat. Okay, first table row will contain our headings, so th id, then we have th with the class ta_r, which basically aligns text to the right, date, then we have th class tar and col_15, which basically makes colon 15% width, status, we can copy this line because the other one is going to have the same classes. Let's paste it twice. After status we have total, and after total we'll have link to the invoice, so invoice. Okay, after we've done our headings, after the headings we're going to loop through our rows. So for each rows as row. Okay, and then we need to obviously close our for each statement, and inside we're going to start with tr and td. The first one will display echo row ID. Next one will be td. If I scroll up a little bit, this time we need to assign a class tar so that the text aligns to the right as well as the heading. And in between these ones we're going to display echo helper set date 1 as first parameter, then row date as the second, so that will display the date obviously. Let's copy this entire thing, paste it under. Obviously now we're not going to be using helper, actually we're going to move this on the new line because we're going to have to do some other things with this first. Okay, now if we remove this, in between the PHP tags we start with a status equals object order get status method, and we're passing order status, which is basically numerical value, and then we simply echo status. So that's what we echo status name. Okay, now get status method is what we're going to be working on in the next video. Now it's time to create the get status method inside of the order class. So if we copy the name, open our browser, actually we've got our class open here. So after get client orders, a few new lines, and we start with public function get status. We take one parameter, which is basically ID. By default it will be null. Now if isn't empty ID, then SQL equals select all from this underscore table 3, which is basically table with the statuses, then where ID equals single quote and concatenation this DB escape, and we pass the ID onto it, double quote, and then obviously single quote after this, and then we simply return this DB fetch 1 this time and SQL as parameter. So that's all fine. We can save this file, go back to our orders page. Now we are going to display another table cell with a class TAR, which will display the total of the order. So open in PHP tag, echo number format, and we're going to pass order total, and we want 2 decimal places, semicolon right at the end, and close the PHP tag. But before this we need to display the currency symbol, we're using pounds, so pound before this. Okay, then we scroll down. Let's create another table cell with a class TAR, because we're going to be aligning to the right as well. Okay, and this time we're going to have opening PHP tag as well and a closing one, and we check if order pp underscore status, which is basically order PayPal order status, equals 1, which means we got IPN, response from IPN, and everything is fine. Our order has been processed, we received the money. And then else, we're going to do something else. Okay, if it equals 1, then we echo in between a single quotes. We're going to start with href equals, and then / page equals invoice, and then we have amp, which is the ampersand basically, ID equals, and then we're going to echo the row. Sorry, it's not order here, it's row, and the same here and here. Okay, we have rows, obviously we're using row name here. Okay, so we have row, and this is going to be ID of our specific record, and after this we echo, and between a single quotes we close in the href property, and then we simply display invoice label, and we close a tag after this. We can also use target underscore blank to make sure that invoice is opened in a new tab on new window, so we don't really go away from the orders page itself. Okay, so that's when the order has been processed. Otherwise, we simply just echo span class inactive, and we display invoice, but it's not going to be a link, obviously. Okay, so that's all here. And I think after invoice we've covered everything. We obviously finish our for each loop, and now before the else statement here, we can echo object paging get paging. In other words, display our paging here. Okay, if we save the file, now if we go back to the browser, click on my orders, you can see my order is displayed here. It will only display paging once number of orders will reach 5, because we want to display 5 of them at a time. And we've got link to the invoice. If we click now on this invoice, obviously we get the error page, but we still have the other one open. It opened in a new tab because we use target blank. So let's move to the next video and create our invoice page. Okay, let's create the invoice page now. Open pages folder, create a new file called invoice.php. Inside of this file, we're going to start with a PHP tag, then ID equals URL, and get param, and we're looking for ID in our URL. Then if isn't empty ID, we're going to do something, and that's basically this is where we can close PHP tag. Now if isn't empty ID, after if isn't empty, we close PHP tag as well, and this one actually will be opening PHP and then closing one here. So now in between these two we will put some content. Now to start with, we need to put the standard HTML page structure here, because we're not going to be using header and footer. We don't want the rest of the page to be displayed within the invoice. Invoice should be blank white page and just the content of the invoice basically, so that they can print it out if they wish to. Okay, I can use clips here in my application, so I just click on that and drag and drop onto my page. If you don't know how to create the standard structure of the page, then please pause this video now and copy the entire content which I've just actually dragged onto the page here, as this is what we need for this specific page. So now that you've copied this, or you've retyped the entire thing, obviously we can start moving on to our statement after if is an empty ID, and we start with object order, which is new order class, And now we get order variable, which will assign object order get order, and we pass the ID parameter. Now we check if is an empty order, then we're going to process. Otherwise, it's going to be just blank page, so we put this second curly brace right at the end. Okay, so now that we know that the ID is in the URL and that the order with this ID exists, we need to get all items. So items equals object order get order items. This method already exists in our order class. We need to pass the ID of the order, so that's all fine. Now object catalog equals new catalog. Okay, now object user equals new user. Okay, so we have object user instantiated as well, and user equals object user get user, and we have order client. We're passing the ID of the client basically here. Now we will also need object country, which was new country class. And after this, object business equals new business class. So quite a few classes, as you can see, that we're going to be using inside of our invoice page. Then business equals object business get business. All these classes and methods are already created. Then we have object basket equals new basket. And that's about it when it comes to instantiation of the classes. Now, one pretty important thing actually is to obviously, if we leave it like this, then everyone who just going to provide the ID of any order will be able to preview the invoice for the order of anyone, basically. So obviously we need to restrict access to these invoices only to the person who's logged in. And obviously we can check it by comparing the ID, the session ID of the logged in user to the client ID of the order. So if is an empty order, and actually we can do it something like this, and session get session, and we need to provide login underscore front equals order client. Let's put this on these two things actually on separate lines so that we can see it clearly. So obviously these two conditions have to be met. So order has to have some values, and session ID, basically ID of the logged in user, has to match the ID of the client of this order. So that's all fine. Let's move to the next video and start actually populating all this information. And I mean, we've already populated them, just putting them into the specific format. Okay, I don't know if you've already realized, but obviously I've made another mistake here. Login should have 2 columns, not just 1. But that's it. Okay, if we scroll down now, we can change the title to invoice. And after our meta image toolbar content now, let's type link href. We're going to be linking to CSS invoice.css file, then rel, we want style sheet, and type, it will be text /CSS, then / and closing tag. Okay, so now we have our CSS file attached. After our opening body tag, let's start with div ID wrapper. Inside of the wrapper, we're going to start with h1 invoice. Okay, after this we start with div, and style we're going to make it width 50%, float left. Inside of this div we are going to start with P, with the paragraph strong tags, and we're going to do 2 and colon. After the closing strong tag, we're going to go PHP echo user first underscore name, then concatenation user last name, and closing PHP tag, then BR to create a new line. Then we have opening PHP tag echo user address underscore 1, and semicolon closing PHP BR. Then we have echo isn't empty. We check if address user address 2 isn't empty. Then we are going to display this address 2. Otherwise, we display null. And we need to attach BR to this one as well. But only display this BR, obviously, if there is value inside of the address 2 field. Okay, then echo user town, then BR. After this, we have echo user county, county, not country, then BR. Then we have, to scroll up a little bit, echo user postcode, BR, and then we have PHP and then closing. We're going to start country equals object country, get country user country, which passes the ID of the country, and obviously we want to get the name of it, so echo country name. Okay, so now that we're done with this paragraph, we can actually remove these white spaces here. And after this first div, we're going to create another one, which will be div style width will be 50% as well, semicolon float right, text align will be right as well. Okay, then we can close it. And in the next video, we're going to be simply filling in content into this div. So we're going to start with the paragraph now, strong as well, echo, this time business name, and after the strong tag we're going to put the BR tag. Okay, now we go for echo new line to BR, which is basically replacing new line characters with the BR tags. Business address, as business address is basically on a text field, text area. Then BR echo business. Well, now we're looking for the telephone. BR. Then we have echo business email. BR. Then echo business website and BR. And actually we don't have to have this BR here because we have closing P tag. Okay, so that's all fine. Now after these two divs, we're going to create the div with a class def and then just a non-breakable space. So ampersand hash and 160 or NBPS basically with the ampersand at the beginning. Then h3 order number, and then we display echo ID, which is basically coming through the URL. Okay, now we start with the table again. I'm going to create a few new lines here so that it shifts up a little bit. Okay, table, cell padding 0, cell spacing 0. Then we have border add 0 as well, and class table repeat again. Okay, first table row will be a headings, so th item, then we have th with the class tar, which will be quantity. Then we have th with the class ta_r and column 15, and we have price heading. Okay, so these are our headings, and now we go for opening PHP tag for each items as item. Okay, let's scroll up, and then we start with the tr and td. The first one would be basically product name, so we open PHP tag and close it. Now we start with the product equals object catalog get product, and we pass item product, which is basically ID of the product. Okay, and now echo product name. Okay, so that's the first one. Scroll up, then we have another td with a class ta_r to align text to the right. This one will simply have echo item quantity. Then we have td with the class ta_r as well. We have our currency symbol, which in my case is pound, and then I think it's best if we put on a new line this way, because the string is going to be quite long. Echo number format, and we want to put object basket, item total, item price, then we put item quantity, and we want 2 decimal places. As you may remember, this item total basically multiplies quantity by the amount, and obviously because we're using number format, then after comma we need to define how many decimal places we want to be displayed with this value. Okay, so that's our total basically for the price for the specific product. Okay, now after our for each loop, we go further and we do the condition if order VAT rate doesn't equal 0. That means that obviously there was some tax. Then closing curly brace, closing our if statement. If obviously we had VAT more than 0 or tax more than 0, in other words, then we do our td with a call span of 2, class brtd, and we display the subtotal with a colon at the end, and then we have another td with a class tar and brtd, which is basically border top dashed, and we're going to be displaying a subtotal here, so pound, our currency symbol, echo number format again, and we go for order subtotal, and then we need to provide the second parameter, which will be 2 decimal places, then semicolon, closing PHP tag. Okay, so that's one of them. If we copy the entire thing and paste it underneath, this time rather than subtotal, we're going to have VAT or tax, and in between the brackets we're going to provide the rate as well, so echo order VAT rate. Okay, and then obviously we need to put semicolon and closing PHP tag. Actually, why not put it on a new line so that we can clearly see what's going on here. Okay, and obviously we need a percentage symbol as well, and then after this we go to the second line, which is order number format, and it's going to be VAT basically, which is the value of the VAT or tax. Okay, so these two are fine. Now we go into the total. So after this if statement, tr, start td, colspan 2, class brtd, and strong, let's make it bold, total, and a colon. You have td with the class ta_r and br_td. And if we put on a new line, scroll up a little bit, we have strong. We're gonna start with our currency symbol, and then we do a PHP echo number format, and we put order total, comma 2 decimal places, semicolon, and closing PHP tag. So that's nearly everything. Now we also need to add the print this invoice button. So after our table, we're going to create another tag, div, with the class def and brtd, and our non-breakable space, you can list and bps as well. And then just a paragraph with ahref, just hash, on click, we're going to call window.print semicolon and return false, so that page doesn't reload basically. And then we simply type print this invoice. So that's going to be a link to print the invoice itself. Okay, we can now save the file and move to the next video. So now that our invoice is obviously ready, if we go to our browser, click on the invoice, and if we are logged in, you will simply see the invoice, which whoever wants may also print. If you click on this link, you can see we've got a print pop-up. So that's everything about our invoice. Now, next thing we're going to be doing is our logout button, which obviously doesn't work yet. If we click on this, you get the error. So if we go back to our application, we can close invoice.php file, open a browser, and create a new file inside of the pages, call it logout.php. Inside of this file, we're going to start with the opening PHP tag, and the first thing will be login, 2 colons, logout method, and we're passing login underscore front. And after this, we have login, restrict, front. And that's everything inside of this file. Now we need to create this logout method. So if we close this file, we go to our classes folder, open the login class, scroll right to the bottom, and on a new line, we start typing public static function logout, and we obviously take the case this time. By default, it's going to be null, and if is an empty case, then we do something else. We will destroy all of the sessions, so session underscore destroy, which will basically clear all sessions. Okay, if the case isn't empty, then session case equals null, and then unset our session with a case. And that's everything inside of the logout method. We can now close login.php file, close our folder, go back to the browser, click on my orders first, and now if we click on logout, hey, we are redirected to the login page. If we want to go back, you won't be able, because we are completely logged out from the front end of the application. So we have to log in again, then we can click on logout again. You can see the logout button changes to login. So if we go to, let's say, view basket, you can click on login, and we are taken back to the login page. So our front end application is officially finished. In the next chapter, we're going to start working on the control panel.